Welcome everyone back. This is another episode of the Go-to-Market Kickback, which is the number one go-to-market leadership interview and strategy podcast in the world. Did you know we had that accolade, Ab?
I'm honored to be in
Va-
this globally well-established podcast.
Category.
Well,
It's a
yeah,
category of one, but we are the number one as I've defined it.
fabulous.
Everyone's in for a treat today. We've got the wonderful professional and highly successful Abigail Maines joining us for a really neat discussion around what is happening in the construction and optimization of sales organizations across the software and cybersecurity landscape in 2026. I'll give a quick bio just to show people how incredibly credible you are in this space. You're a results driven sales and business development executive with a very demonstrated ability to scale global revenue and profit while driving organizational growth and development via world class teams. And I've heard this firsthand from many people that have worked with you, beside you, and underneath you that you are just a astute professional when it comes to orienting people for success in the go-to-market and sales landscape. Right now, you are a go-to-market advisor for YL Ventures, a pure play cybersecurity investment firm with $800 million under management. You were the founding chief revenue officer prior to that at Hidden Layer, which many people know as one of the vendors at the forefront of security for AI. And you've led go-to-market strategy for over 2 decades now at Cybereason, Checkpoint, Cylance, Absolute, Highwired, some of the biggest names that everyone knows that you were consequential in their growth efforts. One of the coolest things you're doing too, it's a long bio, but you do a lot of great things. You're the co-founder of Fierce, a
Yes.
group and community that we proudly support at Lunar. Females in every role change everything, which is a network name aimed at accelerating women's success in business, academia, government, and you guys provide really incredible content, career guidance, role matching, some wonderful events every single year. Cornerstoned by your Fierce 100 conference, what, every fall, would you say? Which is a great event that we've been to many times before. And you've got an MBA to back all of that up. I don't know how you had time for that in the middle of everything.
Yeah,
State University of New York in Buffalo, where you're from,
yeah,
summa cum laude, and you're here in Austin, Texas, one of my neighbors with your husband and two wonderful
yeah.
kids. Daughter, as young as she is so impressive. You put her on the stage in front of hundreds of people, and she is more articulate than me, which isn't hard to do.
Fights me for the microphone. Yeah, Arden, 13. Lucky 13.
Yeah, and you're an author too. You didn't write this in your bio.
Yeah,
You had time
Abigail's
in all
on
of this for a book as well.
yeah, I'm very fortunate. I'm supposed to pay it forward. So I try to do that. And thank you for being a long time, maybe the longest standing supporter of Fierce in the recruitment world, going way back to the early days. So thank you.
I think there's a lot more we can do together. But most excitingly, we're here to talk about something we've both been writing a lot about in 2026 in this go to market organization world. The way people are changing, the way that they're constructing their sales organizations, either in refresh motions or from the ground up in early venture backed businesses, which is the space that you and I both tend to live within. And we're seeing what we're sort of defining as a topic line, why average is too expensive for sales organizations in 2026, and just sort of unpacking the hard truth and saying the things that most people don't say out loud, but everyone knows to be true about how people are constructing their revenue teams this year and why the middle of sales organizations that we've seen proliferate over the last 5, 10 years in this last cycle are disappointing or disappearing rather. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to talk about it. Did I get your bio right? Is there anything else to
Yeah,
add?
thank you. That was very thorough.
That was a long intro, but you do a lot of great things, so I don't want to miss anything. Let's start here. You've been a well founded CRO, you've led giant global cybersecurity sales organizations to incredible success. You're a go to market advisor in very early stage venture backed businesses today. What are you seeing in relation to the topic that I described about the middle of sales organizations, the average performers disappearing across portfolio companies you're working with, and sort of your purview in the landscape?
I did a lot of thinking about this when we started riffing on it. I think one of the things that I would say is like, I don't know that the middle is disappearing so much as it's transforming. I think you will always have a middle. I think it's hard to not have a middle, but I think it can be much smaller than it has been historically. And I think it has to be much smaller. And I think it'll be much more empowered with some of these AI tools that everybody's talking about. Those tools probably can do the most to help sort of these new, smaller teams that we're seeing sort of straddle somewhere between, and I think statistically it's like 58% is where the middle is from an attainment perspective, 58 to like 68. I think if we wanted to go from like 68 to 80 as being defined as the middle, you'll see that team get smaller and you will see it have a lot more tools that are really tuned based upon your elite sellers and what they're doing for that middle to be more productive. And I think, obviously why, number one, I think is very evident to myself and my peer group is just the hard cost. That's always been the case. We're always under pressure, et cetera. I think the second major reason is if you have this huge middle, you have a lot of disruption and distraction and churn in your organization, in your pipeline, because you'll have a ton of deals in there that are like, I was going to say bullshit. Maybe not bullshit, but like they're definitely not forecasted correctly. They're not in the right quarter. And the problem is you have to have so many conversations about them. You're going to talk to the rep. You're going to talk to the rep's manager. You're going to talk to the SC. You're going to talk to the SC. Think about the time and cost associated with those deals. Really a big bucket of waste. What we're seeing in early stage companies is we just don't have time for that. The competitive nature of the world is such that we can't spend a lot of time on middle or underperformers at the expense of either higher performers or more probable deals. And thirdly, I've been really thinking about this over the last couple of months. The economics of a SaaS based software company and a AI based software company are very different, meaning the cost structure of SaaS is much lower in COGS than it is in AI. You're talking like 20, 30 points of gross margin. So you can't carry a big middle if you're talking about losing 20 or 30 points because of inference costs, because you got to get to the new model that's 10 times more than the lower model, but everybody wants the new model. So I think that pressure will hit go to market, because my understanding is that statistically in a customer led sales motion, which is definitely what my experience is in, I'm not a big PLG historically, we represent 45% of the cost of these businesses. And so like if we're giving up or reinvesting 20 to 30% in AI, they're going to come to go to market and get that money to try to improve and a degradation of the gross margin. And I was telling you, Bessemer did a study and they're talking about COGS being the new cap. And that's like an extreme position. But what they're trying to capture there is the fact that we have to acknowledge across the business that we are all going to be under a microscope if we are going to incur so much more inference cost, basically. So I think those are the big three reasons why we're going to see this sort of transformation in the middle, and one to which it still somewhat exists, but it is definitely smaller. It is more tiger team. And then the hope is that the result is they perform better as well as they reduce their cost.
I think about this a lot from a search standpoint and helping some of these organizations build their exec teams and then their strategic and enterprise sales organizations. And traditionally, we've seen like this bell curve model, right? Where you were sort of orienting or diversifying your risk of performance or lack of performance in your sales organization by sort of spreading that thin with that middle that we're sort of categorizing as the whatever the middle 50 or 60% of performers that are hitting, 40 to 60% of quota attainment, where they're not very profitable. They have small margins, but they have some margin, and that can buoy people that you're taking risk on that underperform below margin. And then the real benefits come from just the high performers, right? That are smashing their numbers or killing it in their territories and being exceptionally profitable resources for your business. My perspective, it's like there's a polarization kind of like you're describing, but not because the middle, I think people misinterpret this, the middle is getting worse by any means. It's just I like how you plainly state the economics of the circumstance just can't justify that level of performance at the level that it's at. So it's not that the curve has flattened It's right for profitability and appropriate margin to grow a business has simply exceeded because of the cost of running that business. This is a bit divergent from our topic, but I think an interesting question you might have an answer to. AI is so new in the general landscape. The economics and the costs of it are substantial in most technology markets over time as markets broaden, adoption increases, efficiencies are made, costs lower. My question is, do you think this is a temporary impact or is this going to be sustainable in sort of this new world of AI first organizations holding that cost and orienting their go to market organizations in a different way?
I don't think I know the answer to that. I think you could probably debate it in both directions. I listened
Yeah.
to another interesting presentation by somebody that was talking about how certain models are more performant for certain use cases and they don't get better with newer models. So you could make the argument you don't need to upgrade. So your cost could level out over time and even decrease at some level. We haven't seen that yet. People are all upgrading and using the latest and greatest. There's no question, though, that there will be a standardization on a higher cost structure in the actual cogs of software, period. Whether it's 20 or 30%, who knows? And there has to be a commensurate improvement in other parts of the business to offset it because go to market is 45% of the cost. We're going to see the need to be refined at a minimum or at least better aligned. And I think we are, I mean, we're seeing some of that today. I see like the early use cases would be improving some of the sales development rep and business development rep activity with tooling and then moving some of those folks
Yeah.
to be more complementary and value add to field sellers. I love a pod model where you have an inside and an outside rep partnered up together. I've always felt strongly about that motion and they do different functions. And if you can automate or not even do the SDR, BDR, I'm okay with that personally. But yeah, like I think we're starting to see that. Obviously, you're seeing tools like Glean get really, you're seeing a lot of that. What I haven't really seen, and I haven't seen any data on, is like, how does that make the outcome for a customer better? Because I can tell you when you start to study like elite sellers, they are not using AI better, and that makes them an elite seller, period. What
Yeah.
they're doing is they're still, I think the stat that I saw from a Salesforce study was like 72% of elite sellers are still what I consider to be like foundationally the most important, wildly empathetic and focused on like driving outcomes for their customers, like as their North Star. In some of my prior roles, I used to say we exist to get our customers promoted. Like if you have that mindset and create your entire strategy around go to market as an individual seller, you will become an elite seller. And so I think to the extent AI helps people that don't have that thought process get there. That could be very impactful. But today, I haven't really seen where AI has changed the elite so much as it sort of helped with some of the more repetitive type functions.
I love that saying. I don't think I've ever heard that before. Your purpose is to make sure your customer gets promoted. That
With a
that
simple
means a
concept,
lot.
if you think about it,
Yeah.
but it really drives behavior, right? So, like, if that's your goal, you're going to be honest, you're going to act with integrity, you're going to bring the right resources to the table to make that customer feel supported, et cetera. So, yeah, that's like to me, it's just a simplifying mantra for many people.
That makes a lot of sense. Let me double click on what you said about topics around pipeline drag, forecasting null, management bandwidth. I think that's orienting a lot of this change as well. What
Yeah.
does like a good management profile look like today? And how are you seeing these early stage venture backed companies, maybe in your advisory capacity, change the way that they're modeling the leadership role to adapt to this new type of hiring?
I think we're becoming more and more data driven and consistent result driven. So I think we're seeing less of the one hit wonders. Like if you had a team that hit 250% one quarter, but then everything else has been at like 40%. That is not what we're looking for. We're looking for, the 80 to 100 or 80 to 120 consistently as being much more attractive and somewhere where we want to invest. And maybe historically,
Yeah.
I don't know that that's so new, but I think it's more explicit. I'll say that. Like that's becoming more of a criteria. Maybe are you seeing that too with some of your pursuits that people are
Yeah, we
looking
kind
for?
of I've coined it the Zoom effect. There was
Okay.
this event after the pandemic in 2020 where, 1 to 2 years after that, the world was flooded with account executives and SDRs and salespersons from Zoom
Yeah.
that on paper absolutely dominated for 2 years,
Sure.
right? They couldn't sell enough of their software and they hit 200, 300, 400% of their plan in 2020 and 2021 as everyone was shifting to remote oriented workforces. And that was the hot tool at the time, right? But there was no level of consistency across
Yep.
10 years in that business outside of those 2 years or other businesses that they had sold within, right? And those very quickly went from, this is the hot person clearly is coming off a few big years to a year later. Many of those people, and I don't mean Zoom people specifically, I use that as a placeholder, as not to offend
Mhm.
anyone, but
Yeah.
there was no structure of repeatability in those people, right? And that type of profile, while it caught fire really quickly because of big flashy numbers and large attainment numbers and big earnings from those folks, it showed sort of a disastrous route that a lot of salespeople went down or sales management went down in hiring those types of profiles that didn't have a level of stability in their ability to perform. So, yeah, it's interesting. People want high performers, but they much more highly weight consistency over a longer period of time, call it a 3 to 5 year track record, which is
Yep.
really the index mark. And then, yes, they're qualifying between those people to select the one that's been the highest performer during that 10-year period. So it still goes in kind together, but it's not about that at the forefront anymore.
Yep. Yeah, I think we're definitely seeing that at the both the rep and the manager level. I think we're also seeing definitely at the leadership level folks that have an empathy for the cross-functional nature of go-to-market. So the complementary nature of sales and marketing, those are on the same side of the table. Those are the same teams. They're not antagonists to each other. And that kind of a mindset is very attractive. Similarly, with customer success, that is complementary to the extent you have better retention. If your retention is 130%, that puts less pressure on the net new number, and that's attractive. So people that can come with sort of a cross-functional go-to-market strategy and mindset, I think are definitely an area of focus, particularly early days. You don't have the luxury of having tons of different people and tons of different teams. And so people have to be able to collaborate together
Yep.
or maybe wear 10% of their day is a different hat than they have in the past or than maybe they anticipated. I'm a huge believer in this for early stage companies. I think you lose a lot of momentum if you have silos. You could spend years like talking amongst each other about like being misaligned. And then like meanwhile, the market has changed, your competitors are beating you. And what have you accomplished? And so that's slow and slow as death to me. And so I think people, any sales manager, customer success manager, marketing manager that sees that and is excited about the idea of 1 + 1 = 5, very attractive to any stage company, but particularly early stage company. So I spend a lot of time when I'm talking with folks about getting into early stage companies. I try to understand like, do they understand why that's powerful? Have they ever seen that in practice before? Do they need like the growth mindset that that's something that could help them? And I think some sales leaders that haven't necessarily seen it in action struggle with what that would actually look like in practice. Because what that looks like in practice is not saying, I don't have good leads. Your marketing isn't giving me good leads. Like that's not a thing. Like that is just a waste of time. So that's a big thing that we look for and that people are looking for sure. And I would say maybe like the third thing is, we're definitely looking for consistency in results, but also sort of consistency in like their customer. Like if we can get a customer reference, if we can get like a partner reference, people that worked for them, like that's helpful to us and to people that are making these big investments in early stage careers. So if people have those sorts of things, particularly at the manager level, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Advising a number of these very early stage businesses that are building their go to market teams from the ground up. How are you seeing them redesign their organizations? And my assumption of smaller teams, higher output, much more clear standards, while still addressing the risk of having a much smaller, higher performing organization, the risk of non-attainment or failure of one of those or two of those people is disproportionately higher than if you're spreading it much more thin in sort of the legacy model as we've defined it.
Well, a lot of it comes down to sort of the founding team. So you have multiple time founders. I think it's very different than first time founders. Multiple time founders generally have a bench whereby they have folks that either know them and want to work with them or have worked with other sales leaders at prior companies and they bring them with them. So I think they de risk it a little bit, relatively
Mhm.
speaking. I think when it comes to first time founders, they are very smart and they use their investors, not just the ones that I work with, but others that are in their rounds. They use customers and they use advisors to try to really triage and get as much information about candidates as possible. That is like one of the most important things that we talk about and we work on all the time is just, how to attract and then retain key talent, period. Like even if there isn't in like a spot right this second, companies are always building their bench. They're all, you're always building your bench for the same reason. You're trying to really thread the needle both on timing and candidate. And so you sort of always have to be working on that. So I would say we work at it. Like it's a strategic imperative of all of the companies to be working on attracting and retaining talent. It's a very competitive market for the top talent.
Yeah, it's just a lot more rigor in that process to how you're courting them. The
Yep,
duration of time that you're courting them could be 6 months
definitely.
to 2 years in many different cases, and then the qualification process. That's what I do as an executive search consultant or headhunter, recruiter, whatever you wanna call it, an HR
Yeah,
person. I prefer not
yeah,
that, but it's courtship and it's qualification, those 2
yeah.
things, right?
I think
And depending on the
I see people
circumstance.
waiting long. I would say I see founders waiting longer for the right person than maybe 5 years ago. I
Really.
do think we have longer founder led sales cycles because they do want the right person. That's probably one big difference that I've seen, definitely for multi time founders, because I think they've been burned probably 5, 10 years, 15
Yeah.
years ago. And we do see that taking a little bit more time.
It's so
But
interesting
I'm,
because all these things are there's a really fine line in all these things, as I'm sure you can appreciate. So sorry, I'm hitting you with hard questions that there's not really an answer to, but you're still giving good wisdom nonetheless. Because there's this whole like the ideology of most of the startups that I'm working with today is we're ready to hire ASAP. We need this
yeah,
person to start yesterday, but we will wait for the right person as long as it
yeah,
takes. But then there's this strike while the iron's hot, get in front of the market before a competitor does, or attract the right talent to go after the right customers before something changes dramatically from a macro or micro industry segmentation standpoint
yeah.
that disrupts the whole thing, you know? So are you able to capitalize on a moment in time that your venture investors have given you money to deploy to be able to do that? So there's a real fine balance, right? Too fast or hiring too slow and waiting for the right person. And I think the best way to combat that is to very, very, very clearly and diligently design what your standards and your bar are. So you're
Sure.
not the next best person that might just have a little bit more, or I think that there might be someone else out there. I don't know who it is, but this person's good, but are they going to be the one? If you have those standards clearly defined and you get someone that matches those standards or exceeds them, then you know to pull the trigger right away, right? And the waiting game is done.
I agree. I think that's
Which not many people do that. They don't put that much
well,
rigor
it's
into the hiring process. It's very vibe based.
it's very hard to do. It's very hard to have that intestinal fortitude to not make an exception. I think the other way that I look at it, and we definitely talk about with lots of folks, is you have to be kind of explicit about what the cost of a bad hire is. So, on the rep level, I believe that if on average, if you have an average rep, I think the average OTE is like 190K in SaaS companies. That's not cyber. That's just in general SaaS
Yep.
companies. And if they take 9 months to get to mediocre results, you're talking about almost $500,000 investment. I think when you start to talk like that and you really put on paper, and that's just hard costs. That doesn't include the
And
pipeline
there's
disruption that we
opportunity
talked about.
loss,
Right.
management costs,
When you start to
HR
say that,
benefits, all
because we
that.
make lots of like, we're very prescriptive if we're about to spend $500,000 in the rest of the business. So, like, if you can kind of quantify the hire
Yeah.
in particular, if you find yourself sort of like having the moment of like you really want to hire somebody but you're not sure, I think if you make it more dollars and cents it can help provide clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. How do you define, give me your archetype of a very good high performance elite seller in the early stage cybersecurity space in 2026? Like Outside of their resume, what skill sets, attributes, personalities do you think are most inclined for success this year?
You say 2026. I'm trying to think if it's changed. It hasn't changed for me in a while. I definitely think I've matured since earlier in my career. So let's hope it's changed from then. But I've always had the same equation. It's heart, hustle, and intelligence. And you have to score a two and you get 2 points for heart, which is empathy. And if you don't have that, then you can't get a two. And so that would still be my formula, to be honest with you. So like I'm looking for deep intelligence, which is as a summa cum laude graduate, I know what it takes to get good grades, and so I would say I'm looking for that. Hustle, I think, would be related to what we were talking about without consistency in results over time, and not always in high flying organizations. So like I'm not indexed to relevant work experience, category experience at all. In fact, I like diversity in salespeople's backgrounds, even if they are coming from different roles within go to market. I come from a
Yeah.
channel and business perspective. So like I'm down with that. Empathy for me, or your ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, which is super duper rare, particularly in sales. If you have that, I do think you can actually differentiate yourself as a human, as a salesperson, and then you bring that to the brand. And no matter what I have read over the last 12 months as it relates to AI democratizing, everybody ruining all the jobs, all these things, still your company's brand is not something that AI can replicate quickly. And so I think that if you can bring people in that have the ability to elevate your brand and differentiate it and make it more memorable in a positive way, like that's hugely important to me. And it's very hard. That's probably one of the hardest things to assess, particularly if you don't know that person or they weren't introduced to you by somebody you have known and trusted for a long time. So that's really where you come in and you help with that perspective for people like me, because we want these things, but we don't know everybody, and we definitely don't know them as long or as well as you have. And so I think that's a big opportunity, is to sort of really continue to refine, even in this day and age of AI. You're not going to be able to convince me that empathy is going to not help in sales, period. I don't, no matter what, can't convince me.
100% agree. I'll
Yeah.
tell you more details later, but now as the luxurious business owner that I am,
Yeah.
negotiate my own contracts and work with vendors and stuff, I know firsthand what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
I bet.
I've been ready to write blank checks to companies and they don't fulfill
Yeah.
it with any level of empathy, and it makes it a lot harder to get something done if you don't
Exactly.
feel like
That's a
it's on
great
your job.
example.
Yeah.
Yes. As the founder of co-founder of Fierce, I've had the same experience. It's shocking when you and I know how hard we work at trying to hire the right people and train them the right way. And then you still have these like horrific experiences. And you're like, how is this even possible with all of this? Like crazy. I actually had a
Yeah.
person that did work at my house, and I'll never forget. I said to her, and it was a woman, and I said, I am the customer and I came over to this meeting with you full of anxiety because of how you were going to act towards me. I'm like, and that's crazy. I'm like, I'm a sales leader. And so yeah, so I get it. I'm
On
saying
the
it's rare. It's really hard to thread that needle. I appreciate that. What I'm suggesting here is not something that people are going to listen to and be like, oh, yeah, that's super easy. I got to list 25 names long to hire from. Very rare.
interesting story on that. More positively oriented. My mother is a CFO at a roofing company back in Central Florida,
Yeah.
and small business.
She's
She's
good.
got one person working for her now in a controller capacity or whatnot that's been there for 4 or 5 years. That woman used to be her house cleaner, one of them, and
Yeah.
just expressed the level of intelligence that was necessary, the level of grit
Yeah.
and hard work, right?
Yeah.
Different and frankly irrelevant field, and just a level of heart and emotional intelligence, right? That
Yeah.
presented the opportunity that I think you're the right person to fill a need that we've got right now, and has grown to a position
Totally.
where that woman will probably be the CFO, when my
Yeah.
mother retires, and
That's
has
awesome.
taken just the leaps and bounds in her career, right? But it all came down to those exact three qualification points that you
Yeah.
have when you think about it in retrospect.
Yep. My husband is good at that too. Like he's found lots of talent in very unexpected places. So maybe I've learned some of that from him, because I have lots of stories about how he's found people and they're off on crazy, amazing, which is cool. Like that's a cool story.
What can people do at the beginning of this year to orient for some of these traits, for better progress in their career, better results as a manager, right? Under some of the ideologies that you've laid out here today.
I think if you're a manager, like a first line manager, which is, in my opinion, the most important sales leader role in an organization, that's really where the rubber hits the road. I definitely think you have to be super conscious about how much time you're spending amongst your team and make sure you are not over indexing on the bottom third. Like that's a hard lesson I had to learn a couple of different times because it's natural to be focused on where there's a problem, but this is widely studied and I've learned it the hard way. You really do need to invest in your high performers. Like that is the most, I think Nick Saban has like a gazillion small Instagram or TikToks about leadership and teamwork. And he preaches this
He's
as
got
why
some
I am.
excellent books as well.
So like, I think focusing on your top performers consciously, because you're not doing it. Like you think you are, but you're not. You're not spending as much time with them because you think they don't need me. But think about if they did have you, like that would be even more expensive. So I think that's number one. If I was a frontline manager, just like literally write down how many hours a day are you spending with home and then look at it at the end of the week. Like that level of detail. I think that's number one. Number two, I think there's probably some new metrics that I see some organizations and some new leaders using, things like days in the pipe by stage, I think is super important. Close date slipping, as we've always looked at that, but I think that's another sign of that wide middle and what's actually happening in there. I think for sales leaders, they're going to really have to get their head wrapped around this concept that it's possible the go to market needs to be transformed as much as the big middle that we've been talking about because the cost structure of some of our SaaS companies is going to change, period. And I think if you're a CRO or whatever you are as a leader in the go to market side of the house, if you can actually A, understand it, B, acknowledge it, and C, have a plan, I think you're going to be like unstoppable in the next few years because we're going to see that. Like that's going to become a thing. We're going to see increased costs on some of the AI side. And we on the go to market side can't just have tools that make us incrementally better. We need to acknowledge that that's happened, that's made the product better. And therefore, we need to somehow use that product being better as being able to offset some of our costs. And I think the transformation that we started up with this, the middle is probably a good place to start. Like
Yeah.
trying to get that to be more of a tiger team could potentially pick up all the points you need to pick up from the AI cost increase. Those are my,
Love it.
I know that seems like a lot. That was a lot. That I think if you give me too much time, I come up with lots of stuff people should be doing. So I'll
Well,
end
you can
that.
do
I'll
3, 4, 5 more of these and get all the ideas out.
yeah,
Valuable. You've got a lot of wisdom from just a tremendous amount of success and hard work you put into your career. Thank you for sitting down and sharing some of this, and I'm sure a lot of people will
thank
take
you for
away,
the opportunity.
of course. Anything else you wanna add? Where can the people find you? What can they find you for?
Yeah, you can find probably the easiest. You can find me on LinkedIn. And then if you're interested in fiercenow.org.
Fierce is a wonderful organization, and you've done a lot for that community. I hear it firsthand, like I said, from a lot of the members in there that have taken huge leaps in their career through the advice and the platform that you're putting up.
That's great to hear. And we
Yeah.
actually have a new app coming out, thefierceroom.com. More to come on that next time we
Okay.
talk.
Well, thank you everyone else for tuning in to another episode of the Go to Market Kickback. Thank you, Ab, and we'll be back again soon.
Great. Bye bye.